Hey there. Glad to have you back and excited to talk about limiters and abilities today. And we're going to talk about what this means for you in the context of your off season and the season ahead.
So the first thing I want to dive in and talk about is a very key difference between these two words, weaknesses versus limiters. And it may seem like splitting hairs, but again, like I've said in the past, context matters. And as it comes to these two words, weaknesses are things that are more general and think of things like your ability to climb hills or do short little bursts. Um, and you may not be as good at certain things like this just generally. But limiters are more specific. They're tied to a goal, and they're something that will limit your outcome. So you may not be able to climb well on the bike and on the run, but you may be going to do a key race or your target race that isn't hilly, so it's not a limiter. So we want to, as we kind of go forward in this discussion, look at, hey, where am I good as an athlete? Where am I not as strong? And then are these actual limiters in the context of what I want to do? So that's kind of key. So if you hear me talk about weaknesses versus limiters going forward, that's what I'm talking about. A limiter is going to be something that will hold us back from reaching our goal and is something that's going to require some extra attention throughout our training moving forward to get to our goal. Or it may downright mean it's something we can't overcome and we need to be careful with race selection, which is something I've had to deal with some of my one-on-one athletes in the past. So let's dive into natural abilities. And this is just kind of a nice visual way to look at kind of the key performance indicators or key chunks of performance as it pertains to endurance sports. Obviously, aerobic endurance is a chunk of this, right? These outside corners are the basic natural abilities. So we've got endurance, strength, and speed skills. So having strength is important. Strength ties into things like being able to go uphill and climb well and put out some power when we need to. Speed skills are having an ability to turn our legs over when we need to or turn our arms over quickly. Um, think of the cyclist who may pedal really slowly versus someone who has a quicker turnover. That falls under speed skill. Same thing for running. Think of a really long plodding gait versus nice quick boom 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 boom. Those are speed skills versus aerobic versus strength. Um, the advanced natural abilities or the advanced abilities are combinations of these, right? So when we combine aerobic performance with strength and we challenge it in that way, we're starting to work on muscular endurance. Um, when we start to go as quickly as we can, turning our legs over and going as fast as we can, we start to cross. We're challenging the aerobic system as much as we can, and then we cross over into anaerobic endurance, being able to hold anaerobic glycolytic efforts as long as we can. So these are a combination here. And then power, sprint power, is the ability to combine force with speed in a short, bursty kind of manner. So think a kick at the end of a run race or a sprint in a bike race or having to get up a really short punchy hill. That's what power kind of comes in as an ability. So mainly what I want to show you here is this is a nice visual of, hey, here's kind of what we need as endurance athletes. It's the basic skill set, and we all have a certain amount of strengths and weaknesses within this to start, and then it'll change as we work throughout the season. So the question is how do we kind of get a sense of our abilities or our natural abilities? And I've got two answers for that. One, as I've mentioned previously, there's a strengths and weaknesses assessment that is included as a resource in this lesson and in previous lessons to help just with some subjective questions to say, hey, here are some things that might give you some clues. Do this for each sport. And it should give you a breakdown that circles back to the abilities triangle, right? So do this. Do this at the beginning of a season or at the end of a season. This is a great little tool to kind of see, hey, has this changed? How has it moved? But it is a subjective look at that. Not to say it's wrong, but it's subjective. So it's kind of going off of our gut instinct on how we do. And then we can also do more objective measures. And I'm talking things like doing field tests. So many of you are probably familiar with doing a 20 or a 30-minute lactate threshold or FTP test. This is going to give us a look at like an aerobic capacity. We can do critical power testing, which is kind of everything. It's 20-minute, 5-minute, 1 minute, 10-second, 5-second, kind of all these different little intervals to develop a pace curve or a power curve and see where are our weak spots in that output. A critical swim speed CSS test is a combination of a 200 meter or yard swim and a 400, and we use that to kind of create an estimate for a 1,000 time. But within that test, we actually have a nice little look at your 200 time and your 400 time, and it gives us a little insight to your strengths and weaknesses within that test. And we can also look at just pure VO2 max tests like a 1.5 mile test or a ramp test. And then race results. If you've raced various distances at a best effort throughout the year, you're going to have insights in that. So you can kind of help look at who you are as an athlete. You can look at progression. You can look at how you've come from the beginning of the season to the end. And if you've taken good notes in your post-race debrief, you'll have a sense of, hey, what sticks out? Where were my tough spots? Where did I not stack up? Next slide, I'm going to give you kind of a little peek at what I'm talking about with critical power tests, just so you can have a sense of what it looks like in real life. So this is something from Training Peaks, a nice little chart that is a critical power chart, and it basically is looking at 60-minute, 20-minute, 5, 1, and 5-second power outputs from cycling as it relates to some various standardizations and benchmarks. So as you can see, this athlete is very strong in the 5 and the 20 and the 60 and consistently strong. She does well here in this 5 and 20 and doesn't lose much output here. So the question is and then we have weaknesses here. So the question you have to look at with this data is, one, have we done these efforts to actually have an accurate representation? And if the answer is yes, then okay, we've got accurate representation here. Then two, what are we doing for races? In the case of this athlete, she is multiple hours, 2 to 10 plus. So we need to be good aerobically, right? So we definitely need to be good in the 20 to 60. And we may want to see a little higher here as the events get longer in the 60. But excellent output here. And that would indicate probably some strengths in being able to go up shorter climbs, medium climbs, and even like a longer 20-minute climb with some repeatability. What's not going to be great is like punchy efforts, sprints. So if we're looking at cycling, for example, or something with more variability in the output and a lot of back and forth with the pace, probably a big limiter is here, a weakness. But again, this is where it's good to know kind of what your profile is, what your weaknesses, strengths are, and how they relate to your race, so we can know limiter, not limiter, what do we need to work on. And in the case of this athlete, one thing we want to work on is getting probably muscular endurance up here so we can hold a higher output for longer over these longer durations. And that's going to be key to cracking this kind of up onto the same level as these two strengths. And then finally, I want to give just a quick little example of the skill triangle, and I'm going to call it the story of the fast marathoner and the mediocre 5K. This was actually a discussion I had in the clinic just the other day, where one of my colleagues asked me, like, hey, I was following this marathoner who also ran a 5K on the same weekend, and he averaged, I don't remember what the exact numbers were, like 5:30-minute miles for the marathon, but was only able to run like a 5:10 average for the 5K. Like, why was that? He asked me. And my answer is that guy is incredibly good and strong here in aerobic endurance, muscular endurance. Um, but as it comes down to these two skills, there's a big demand for having speed and turnover that you do tend to lose as you get a little more specialized in the marathon. And some people naturally have a little more range. Their nervous system will let them go into speed skills a little bit more. And there's a much higher anaerobic load um, required of a 5K that is that fast. So one, that athlete probably wasn't doing the work anaerobically because he's a marathoner. So he's doing more endurance, muscular endurance work and staying away from these anaerobic efforts. So think, going back to that other chart, think 1 minute and under, even maybe 2 minutes and under. We're looking anaerobic. Um, so that is a really nice illustration of, hey, what does training get us? Like we have natural abilities, and then our training will shift us into um, a certain specialization for the race we're trying to go for. And that's what training should do. It should get more specialized for the goals we're trying to do. So that athlete worked at aerobic endurance and muscular endurance, maybe a little speed skills, but not anaerobic endurance to try to be really good at a 5K. So hopefully that kind of gives you a picture of how to define limiters, weaknesses, how to get a sense for it, and then we're going to use that in future discussions to shape our training throughout the season so that we can make the best use of our time to get the best results on race day. And a key concept to take away and always keep in mind is your training should move from more general to more specific to very race specific as you get down to your target race. So we want to keep these things in mind throughout the whole year as they relate to our target race and how we're progressing and what we need to work on. So that's why these are important to keep in mind, what our natural abilities are, how they stack up, how they relate as weaknesses and limiters, and then how we're going to work on them in the season. So take a second if you can, if you haven't done it already, go through, do the assessment, do some tests if you haven't, see where you come out, and then put that in the context of what you want to do next season. That is all for today. Hopefully that helps shed a little light on the importance of weaknesses, limiters, and what kind of the different natural abilities are and why they matter. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, we will continue to build on this. Have a great time.